What, if any, legal herb do you use for moods? Well, anything that I can smell, anything that I can taste, that gets me to a certain place or triggers certain thoughts or emotions or energies in me is something I'm all for. What's the most recent spell or ritual you have done? As for slight detail, I don't share the details of my spells, but I did, with the blue moon having just been passed, settle down to decide what the blue moon was going to be for me, and it needed very much to be a moment where I simply sat with the moon and opened myself up to possibility. It was simple, but it became amazingly, don't I say complex? Oh, let's just say there was many layers of experience and possibility that came out of the sitting with the blue moon. It was in a ritual situation. I had ritually cast a circle, but it was not a highly ritualistic situation. Do you have a happy place you go to during meditation? I do. In my training in my young years, we were trained to have a spiritual landscape that was not of this place, that we turned to explore all the aspects of us that this world kept us from exploring, and to come to an intimate relationship with the elements, the four elements there. And it has been my place, my happy place, ever since. What's your favorite witchy book? Vivienne Crowley's Wicca in the New Millennium, which I don't know, is it now Wicca in the New Age, or the title keeps changing every time she redoes it, but it's my favorite book on the emotional and historical and psychological and archetypal and religious and spiritual aspects of the religion of Wicca. Do you have a ritual to get ready before a ritual or a spell? The ritual before the ritual. Yes, I do. When I settle down, I put my hands on my altar and I dedicate myself to the intent of the ritual I'm about to perform, or the focus of the work I'm about to do. And before I actually get into the creation of sacred space, I will play a certain piece of music, or I will read a certain piece of poetry. There's something that's the step between the busy mundane world and the giving it over to the separate space for ritual that's the in-between for me. I also do that at the backside of ritual, where I come back, including that step of returning. Do you always use your own spells, or do you tweak others? I've got no problems stealing what works for me from any place I find something that inspires me. I've never used something in a working word for word unless it was poetry. Sometimes there's been quarter calls that just moved me and I've used them. In my own personal book of shadows, I have the things that I've used traditionally all the years of my practice, and then I have the things that crop up that I note where I found them, who said it. I may have been that a friend did it. It could be I read it. It could be that I even saw it online. Not so much online, but I like to be moved and inspired and jostled to think from a different perspective by the things that people offer. If it's out there where you can see it, as far as I'm concerned, they've made an offering of it. I have no problems taking advantage of that. Do you prefer spells, ritual inside or outside? I don't care. Whatever I'm called to, whatever the situation allows for. If you're coming from a Christian background, did you find the transition hard with family and the whole going to hell thing? Basically, leaving all you had been told was right. I never had to deal with that with family because I kept my business private. I've always been a very private person when it comes to choosing what I would share and what I would not share with others. Choosing who I felt I had to explain myself to, who kind of earned the right to understand the intimate details behind what I believe or what I do. So I never had a problem with family because of the way I picked and chose who I shared what with. What are your totem animals? My spirit guide, my animal guide is a Canada goose. What are some things you reuse after spells and ritual work? I've never had a concern about reusing things. One thing there's always been in my practice, the thought of making best use whatever the earth provides us to work with. If the spell, or the working, or the focus is something that needs to be done and completely stepped back from, made an offering of, or indeed come from the place of a sacrifice of some kind, I'll decide that something needs to be buried or burned or destroyed. But I reuse candles. I reuse bits and pieces of the ingredients of spell work, and I've never had a qualm doing that. Who helped you the most when you started on your path? It would be the priestess of my first coven. And I really would have to say, such a close second to that was my brothers and sisters within that coven. It's where I got my sense of who I was and who I was in relationship to. Remember I referred earlier in the questions to no fear that I'd make a mistake, because I was just brought up to trust in my gods. But I'd say the most powerful place that began from was the private discussions I had with my priestess as I was preparing for my initiation. Do you know any good witchy phone apps? Don't have a smartphone. What's your favorite magical study? I am totally engaged in a re-study of the tarot, having been involved with it in the 70s and early 80s, and having put it aside and having rediscovered it, I guess it's been about a year ago now, and up to my eyeballs in restudying it. Outside of YouTube and Facebook community, do you have a lot of witchy friends in the physical world? At different times in my life, I would have had to have answered that very differently. There's almost always been some kind of a family or a circle or a coven that was part of my life. Where I live now? No. I've not made those kind of contacts where I live now. I hope to. But so far, I work pretty much alone with only a couple of friends in person that I can spend time with and do some ritual work with. Do you feel that the deities you work with are a force from one higher power, and that all beliefs and religions are from the same God and place? I believe that I don't have to believe when it comes to that. I don't have an opinion about what the higher or wider force is behind the religious beliefs of others. I know, I've gone into circle with some, that we've connected to the same thing. I can feel it surrounding us and moving through us. It seems to me that spirituality that comes from a place of connection rather than disconnection becomes reunited with some source, some oneness. It's like we're yearning to return to it, and so we find it together. And it seems to me that there's some, whether it's the Drayton or unity or love or whatever, it seems that there are times at which I get the sense that with certain groups or with certain people that there is a connection to something, and it's a thing we can't name that's the same thing. All religions from the same God? No. I don't see that, because religion I see is a construct of man outside, in the end, of the true understanding of mystery. That's a pretty heavy one to end it with, isn't it? I do see a unity and a oneness behind deity as I see it. I celebrate it through the plurality of God and Goddess, and they're very real to me, very distinct and individual, but at the same time, they're one with whatever it is they come from, whatever it is that everything comes from and returns to. It's all mystery. I don't have to understand it, I just have to feel it, and that is what it is for me. And do I think others are touching on the same thing? Absolutely, at times I can tell that we are. I've met people at the etheric level who are on the same journey that I'm on. I have met people in person who are. And yet, what has come into the world and been experienced as God or Goddess or religion and specific practices throughout history and now, I don't think there's a oneness behind that. I think all of that is chaos from which things are born. it's like the cauldron, the boiling cauldron of possibility, and either things are born from it or things move through it and into the world that are a connection to some oneness. But the specific beliefs and religions, they're constructs of humankind. I don't see they're necessarily connected to some greater sense of mystery. I like to think mine is, but it's the story I tell. So even when it comes to having an opinion about my own connection to the one place, the one source, the one place of return, it's the story I tell. Interesting to do these 77 questions. Not possible for me to do them succinctly, briefly, and shortly. If you haven't done this, you might want to search YouTube for 77, whatever I title this video with will be the one that's the topic as it's been most put out there. Because you're going to see some wonderful people sharing some wonderful, wonderful experiences of their lives and their practice and their spirituality. And you'll find people you just are so tickled to have some things in common with, and you're going to be intrigued by what you find that's a different experience from yours. And if you do a video response, I think it was the Lady Grave Dancer that was the originator of this fine collection of 77 questions. I do hope, though, that you'll link to me here, too, so I don't miss any response that you do. Or if you've already done it, if you would list it below, I can make sure I've already watched it. I'd really like to see what your thoughts on these have been. Thank you for spending so much time with me. Welcome me back after I've been wandering away and not doing topic videos for a while. For now, I wish you all mirth and reverence. Merry part.